One of the things for anybody who's new, why we try to do these is for anybody who's looking to buy a business and you spend any time doing it, you know that there's a lot of noise out there, there's a lot of clutter, and there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation. And so you need to really take your time and decide where you get your information, because it could become really non-applicable to what you are doing. So you have misinformation, which is on some of these forums where you have buyers going back and forth with each other, a lot of unknowns. So there's information that's exchanged that's not really accurate. And then you have the whole bucket of disinformation, which are really almost predatory practices by people trying to sell products and resources that really are misleading as to what it takes to get a deal done. And so just guide yourself accordingly. And what we try to do on these sessions is to provide you with really good information and never disinformation. You may not always like to hear exactly what I have to say, but it'll always be the truth and accurate and reflect the marketplace and never misleading. So today we have an open Q&A. I have a number of questions that came in from various people recently that if we have time, we'll cover those off as well. But want to open up the floor to anybody who has any questions. While the questions are being asked, please kindly keep your phone on mute. I think Mercedes, we're hearing some background noise, so if you can just mute your microphone. No problem. Mute your microphone, and anybody who has a question, just hit the raise hand icon, and we'll go from there. Hey, Jamia, how are you? So I would hope you have some questions. If not, I will go into some of the content. If you want, again, just hit the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to your questions. And I'll cover a couple of things that have come up recently. You may see a short video posted on YouTube and sometime in the next couple of weeks where I talk about a question that we got on, I think the exact question was, said that her husband had told her that she should only be buying a business but that's been around for 5 years. And I think she posed it in, is he right? And my answer is no, he's not right. He's wrong. When it comes to looking at businesses and history, yes, it's wonderful if you have a very long history to a business. However, keep in mind that what happened, 5-10 years ago is just not reflective of the immediate future. The most recent past is going to be closer to resemble the near-term future. Personally, for me, 3 years is always going to be adequate. I don't want something less than 3 years, just because 3 years will really be able to give you the opportunity to evaluate trends. 5 years, great, wonderful, but I think, as I said in the video, 5 years sort of meaningless in some regards, because what happened 5 years ago doesn't necessarily reflect today. I had hair 5 years ago. I don't have much hair left today. So 3 years is really, it allows you the ability to lay out financial statements for the 3 years and look at real trends over that time. So don't get hung up on saying, I've seen it plenty of times where people say, I want criteria business has been around for 10 years. It's great if it's 10, but it doesn't really tell you much the idea as far as what's going to happen in the immediate future, because the most recent past, all things remaining equal, should reflect the most immediate what you can expect in the immediate near-term future. Anybody have any questions related to that? Clear? Good. The other thing is seeing a lot, this is really common, and it's actually becoming more frequent. People struggling with, business brokers and the gateway, if you will, like getting through to sellers, when there's a broker involved in the transaction, and what you can do to get through that gateway. So there's a couple things to think about, and for those of you that are new on these calls, I would urge you to not use the term searcher. Okay, that has become like toxic in the world of mergers and acquisitions, and is like the immediate red flag for a broker. And when I say searchers, there's two types, as you know. There's self-funded searchers, and then there's funded searchers. Funded searchers who have proven capital behind them, and they're part of a structured search fund. Searchers are buyers. So to call yourself searcher, it is an enormous red flag with business brokers. And business brokers want two things when they have their first encounter with a buyer. One, they want to know that you have the capital, and second, they want to know that you can get to the finish line. That's what they care about. And when using this term searcher, it immediately draws attention to the fact they figure that people either don't have capital or they're tire kickers or what have you. So just don't use it. I mean, use the term, you can use the buyer, you can use the term investor, but searcher is really becoming a phrase that's really unwelcome. So stay away from using it. What else do we have? Questions here? Yes, financials. So a question came up regarding an individual, the broker seller asked them for their personal financial statement, proof of funds, and they were concerned that providing their personal financial statement was going to skew how the buyer and seller looked at them from a standpoint of having a lot of capital, which is a nice situation to have, a lot of capital and impacting the asking price. It's actually the complete opposite. The more creditworthy, the more capable that you're able to prove that you're financially able to complete a transaction, the more you're elevated in the eyes of a buyer and seller. So you should never be afraid to provide that financial information. The other thing that you really want to do is, for those of you who are stateside or in America, you want to try to get yourself SBA pre-qualified, even if you don't go down that road. You know, I'm a huge believer in seller financing. Even if you don't want to go down that road, it immediately demonstrates that you're qualified to finance the transaction. You don't have to go down and do structure the deal with SBA financing, but immediately it elevates your credibility. The other thing is, if you're looking to, what we're seeing a lot of is buyers going out and signing LOIs. I'm seeing this a lot from brokerage community, signing LOIs, not having any capital behind them, tying up the seller, then looking to go find money. And seller gets all aggravated after because you waste 60 or 90 days with the seller. And the reality is that's completely ass backwards. You got to start to line up your financing immediately, whatever that looks like, whether it be SBA pre-qualified. If you're in a small town, it could be a local bank, or it can be.
We don't have to listen to this, though, do we?
It could be a local bank. It's fine, but it could be investors. Someone's got their background noise on. I think it's Tom. If you are working with some potential investors, you want to at least have a letter. It could be a benign letter from them that they're prepared to fund you in a transaction that meets their criteria. But getting your finances lined up as early as possible is critical in this process, because what you're going to start to see shortly, I believe, is unacceptance or non-acceptance of LOIs that aren't accompanied by proof of funds. It's just becoming so rampant in the industry. And this is a result of all these self-anointed gurus selling these courses and programs and mastermind groups saying you could buy all these incredible businesses with no money down. And it's just caused a flurry of activity in the marketplace. And it's the trends are starting to reverse. And so get that part of your deal in order as early as possible. Okay, anybody have any questions related to that, or need some little bit of help or guidance regarding the proof of funds, personal financial statement, anything related to financing the transaction?
Yeah, I have a question regarding that, Richard. Especially if you're trying to fund a deal in a more creative way, let's say, and you are actually, you don't have a huge amount of your own capital, nor do you necessarily want to be over leveraged. I had an encounter with a broker who, some of them I think are a little bit too much, and they kind of close down any conversation before you can disclose, quite extensive information. And I feel like there's a kind of a balance to be struck whereby it's fair enough that they're asking you, but you kind of think, well, there might be a conversation to be had with the seller anyway, even if you don't meet their strict qualification?
So it's a very fair question. Hi, Marvin. How are you? Nice to see
Hey,
you.
so, yeah, I apologize for being late. I just got off a meeting. Sorry.
Of course.
Mm.
So it's a great question, William, and it happens frequently. So look, one of the ways that I want to answer this is to understand that in some of these cases where you are going to have to go down the road of seller financing or more creative financing, you may actually have to carve out the deals with the business brokers because they want the path of least resistance. They want someone that, I mean, is delusional, but they want someone walking in with a bucket of cash, right? They don't want any type of financing and think they're going to sell the business for all cash, and which really doesn't happen. But they're a gatekeeper, and you may not get this to the seller. So in you certainly have to broaden your search horizons, keeping in mind business brokers only sell about 10% of all deals. They make a lot of noise, and they occupy a lot of space in the marketplace as far as their listing is concerned. And anything I say disparagingly towards a broker shouldn't be taken that way. I do that type of work myself, so I understand that world. So I'm probably insulting my own community, but you may have to go outside that world and work with sellers directly, because what happens is ultimately deals get done between buyers and sellers and who establish, for the most part, a good relationship. So if you're not making any headway with any of the brokers and you really require, a high level of seller financing and very little capital to put in, then the only way that you're going to get a deal done is with a seller with whom you're going to establish a meaningful relationship. Now, of course, you can get a deal done with a desperate seller, but that's usually a garbage business, and we don't want that. So you need to you may have to stay away from some of the broker type deals and speak with sellers and contact them directly. And once you engage with them and having these good conversations, then the trust builds. The trust builds. They start to see you as a potential person to take over their business. You could start getting into more of the conversations related to financing. You will not be able to have that conversation with a lot of the brokers if your financial situation just doesn't allow for it. But the good news is they don't do 90% of the deals. So the marketplace is huge of those type of businesses that are for sale, that are not for sale through a broker with whom you can have these conversations.
Got it. Yeah. I've realized that direct solicitation is the best approach, and I've been told that it is just a case of combining volume in terms of especially letters written to people, like personally, but then also like building a meaningful relationship with them in person when you do actually get someone who is willing to have a conversation and building on that trust.
Correct.
You can't just rely on an email cold, spray and pray, and you have to go and meet them in person.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is the best transactions come out of conversations and meeting with people, whether it is a seller and when you have a meeting, it may not be them, but it leads to them talking to you about someone else, or with accountants and attorneys, and they have someone who's recommended. It's getting that personal relationship with them. And to your point about emails and what have you, yeah, I mean, spray and pray just doesn't work in this. Keep in mind, I mean, the amount of letters, when I say letters, emails and calls and postcards that business owners get, and especially here in America, it's like every day. So they don't even know who's real. So writing those personalized letters to them where they're going to open it, yeah, it's the old-fashioned way, whether it be through FedEx or the U.S. Postal Service, or in the UK, the British Postal Service, those letters get opened. The other ones, it's just like, who are these people?
Yeah, you have to stand out.
Anybody have any questions related to seller contact, deal flow, anything of that nature? Because one thing I can tell you in this world, and I've been doing this for 36 years, whether you're buying a laundromat on Broward Boulevard here in Fort Lauderdale, or you're buying a billion-dollar company in your PE firm, deal flow is always the challenge. I mean, at all levels, deal flow is the challenge, and it's the hardest part of the process to work through. That's typically why it takes the longest.
I have a question, Richard.
Yes. I don't know why I put on my
Yeah.
glasses. It's like I hear better when my glasses are on. Go ahead.
So I've actually automated the process. I took some of your advice before I bought the course and purchased a subscription with Data Axle. So I have a huge amount of data points, and I'm an automation engineer by profession. So I basically automated the entire letter creation process, and after I kind of find out the four business categories that I was looking at, I don't really know what to do with my time because most of the process is automated, and I'm trying to figure out what's the best use case for my time outside of waiting for sellers to actually reach back out.
Okay, so that's a great question. So tell me, how well versed are you in financial statement analysis?
Outside of underwriting real estate deals, not really.
Okay. Marvin maybe give me a thumbs up with this one. I would urge you to start to get as well versed as possible on the financial side of things, understanding financial statements. You don't have to be an expert, but you've got to be reasonably well versed. You're not going to do your financial due diligence yourself, but when you start getting responses and you start looking at businesses and you start looking at the initial financial statements, you want to be able to go through them effectively, because you can't bring in a CPA to look at every deal for you because you'll spend a fortune. So you need to have an understanding of financial statements and how they work, P&L statements, balance sheets, etc. Also, it's probably in my career, probably the smartest thing that I did early on in my career. When I started buying businesses, I didn't know the difference between a P&L statement and a balance sheet. And now, years later, I mean, I'm really well versed at it, but it's going to help you once you ultimately become a business owner. You need to become well versed in understanding financial statements. So I would brush up those skills. Absolutely. Am I getting the thumbs up, Marvin? Yeah,
Yeah.
Marvin. I'll let Marvin talk afterwards. Go ahead.
Just biggest weakness with most sellers coming in is they get lost there and rely on other people, too much too early.
And
Just
Marvin,
a quick comment on your other guy there, the question that you asked there, and I would say to you that, you're seeking motivated sellers, right? And the hardest thing to find, the deals get done when you have a highly motivated seller who's got something to sell. So sometimes, and sellers are reluctant to say I'm for sale to anybody sending out. So, but there are motivated sellers out there, to your point, Richard, that just looking for that right conversation with somebody they can trust.
yeah, and thank you, Marvin. It's very helpful. And just to let you know, Marvin does a lot of due diligence. He's very reasonable in the work that he does. A lot of people that call this his quality of earnings, and people get ripped off of to the depth and extent of information that they need. So I'm happy to share. And Marvin, if you want to put in the chat, your contact information, because I would urge anybody as you go along the road and you're looking at any businesses or you have to get some due diligence work done, quality of earnings, I would urge you to get in touch with Marvin, because he could be the perfect resource for probably everybody who's on this call.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And Matthew, getting back to use of time, the other thing that I would urge you to do is, it's hard at the beginning to figure out, challenging, let's say, to figure out what type of business is right for you, and you're going to go through that process. I would suggest get out and speak to as many business owners as possible in a wide array of industries. Because you say it as far as using your time. First of all, you never know where a lead will come from as far as a potential opportunity is concerned to acquire. The other thing is buffing up your skills related to running a business is really important. At the beginning, it's you don't know much, so you're going to rely on the seller and effective training and transition. But the more you can learn from business owners, things, questions I always like to ask them. I go in, no matter what type of business owner I encounter, I'm always engaging with them in a conversation. I find it fascinating, whether I'm going to the dry cleaner or if I'm going to the barber, or if I happen to be in my intermediary work, speaking with a large manufacturing company. What do you like about the business? What you don't like about the business? What keeps you up at night about the business? What are the best and worst decisions that you've made during your career? What type of advice would you give to someone like me who's never bought a business, or that type of stuff? So engage with people, and you could, and Matthew, there's some terrific groups that you may want to get involved with. Also, SCORE. Where are you located?
In Michigan.
in Michigan. So there's going to be SCORE groups, which is the Service Corps of Retired Executives. It's an arm of the SBA, and they'll have regular meetings or seminars or webinars, but you can also book appointments with these people. They're usually, you'd be surprised at the caliber of executives that volunteer their time at SCORE offices. You just go have a chat with them. So I think between a combination of getting yourself really well versed in the financial reporting and understanding them, and going out and meeting business owners, I think you know it would be a really, really good use of your time. And of course, once you hone in on the type of business that you believe is right for your skill set, and you gather some level of conviction and confidence in that, then go meet with those type of owners. Exactly. They don't have to be selling their businesses, but they will be able to give you great insight into that world in that particular sector. So that's where I would be spending my time while you wait for some of these responses. And I'd also be I'm also really curious if you can keep me posted how the results are based on the programs that you've written, to see what type of results that you get back, and the caliber and the quality of the responses. So please keep me posted on that. I'm very, very curious.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And then also, so with that being said, I believe the right business for my specific skill set is a medical billing company.
A medical what? I'm sorry? Medical billing?
Yes.
Okay.
So with that said, it's kind of discouraging. So I was partly excited as well as discouraged, because it seems as if that it would be harder for me to meet an owner. Maybe that's just a limiting belief. So I don't really know how to access an owner of those types of companies.
Okay. So there's two parts. You're saying the access related to whether or not they're for sale, but just like picking their brains?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I have found in my life that most people are very happy to help. You get some odd people that, turn you away, but generally speaking, most people are happy to help others, and especially entrepreneurs. And what I would do for those that you want to talk to, whether it leads to a conversation about sale or not, is I would send them a handwritten letter and just be very honest of what you're looking for, that you're looking to get into this field. I would try to have those conversations with someone who don't deem you to be potentially competitive, so it might be outside your immediate marketplace, and just let them know that you would just love to take 15 minutes of their time to pick their brains. And again, my experiences, and sometimes it may need to send a letter, a written letter, or even by FedEx, but if you contact I don't believe you have to contact a whole lot of people to get a good amount of responses that, hey, here's my name. I'm looking to acquire a business in medical billing, not in your area, nothing competitive, but I'm a young person starting out, and I want to, or this is my first potential acquisition. I would love to be able to pick your brains and for you to give me a little bit of guidance or some pointers related to the industry, how, things that you would suggest, etc. And you'd have the odd person who'll reject you, but in my experience, the majority of people will happily respond. I've done this in all kinds of industries for many years. And again, it's just my experience that people are happy to help. You just have to reach out, just get the marbles out of your mouth, just to get, just to reach out to them and try to have a conversation with them. And I think you'll be surprised at, the caliber of people and the willingness of people to help.
Awesome. That's very encouraging. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Okay, let me see if there's any hands here. Well, my point to all of you is, if you're on this call and you don't have any questions, you probably should own a business already. Okay. Here we go. I saw a couple of hands go up. William, go ahead.
The question about like certain hot industries, HVAC has been very hot, and I'm wondering, and cold, I suppose, hot and cold and airy. Anyway, and I was wondering about, like, I don't actually think HVAC is going to be that much of an interesting kind of market for these like institutional buyers and things, And I'm wondering why. So I've zeroed in on commercial landscaping because I already run a landscaping company and the recurring maintenance contracts and stuff. And I'm wondering why is it that there isn't much interest in that from like PE
You're talking
And,
about
and what
in commercial landscaping?
Yeah, and also just in general, what do you think it is that makes certain industries hot, and what are signs that an industry could be becoming hot in the next few years?
Okay, so we'll divide that into two, that question. When it comes to the HVAC, what you're seeing now and have seen for the last couple of years, and it's still plenty hot, HVAC, plumbing, electric, roofing businesses, blue collar businesses are really, really hot, meaning the multiples have gone bonkers. A big part of that is related to AI, because AI is not going to impact those businesses as far as taking over. You're always going to need people working as plumbers and electricians and roofers. So it's not good. So AI, that's not going to be a business impacted by AI in the actual work. Sure, as far as data analysis and what have you, many businesses will be impacted. But those blue collar businesses are not going away, and they're not a threat related to AI versus some other businesses. The other thing which happens in industry when PE or institutional money, which could be family offices, private equity firms, when they start to get attracted to a certain industry, all hell breaks loose. It's like everybody wants to get in. It's sort of crazy, but that's really what happens, and they eliminate the little guy from being able to buy those businesses. And I've seen this time and time again. And what generally happens is it all ends in tears, because what they start paying multiples that they can't substantiate. It's like becomes a race to the bottom. And as soon as one major institutional buyer comes out with either a press release or exits a business and says, hey, this investment in this particular industry has not worked out like we hoped, okay, it just bottoms right out. And I'm seeing it in certain industries right now where the multiples are starting to decline. And I'll give you an example. We're seeing it in residential roofing. And a ton of PE firms buying residential roofing companies. The first thing to keep in mind about residential roofing companies is you go back into business every single day. You have to go find a customer every single day. So there's not like continuity. Yes, you may have a reputation, you may have some name recognition in a certain marketplace, but you go back into business and have to find a customer every single day. There's no recurring revenue. There's no sustainability. Even if you're doing work for homeowners associations or condos, that bleeds into commercial business. And what you've seen now is a lot of these PE firms and institutional buyers bought residential roofing companies like drunks and paid big multiples. I mean, I know someone locally sold his business for a 17.5 times multiple. I mean, just think about that for a second. But the double-digit multiples in residential roofing have been very common, and that industry is starting to collapse. Because what happens is you get all these institutional buyers. They own all these residential roofing companies. They start throwing money into processes, systems, and procedures, and growth capital, and going out and marketing. And they have all these, workers. They have to keep them working, and bids become more competitive. And as people started to say, well, you know what, instead of replacing my roof, I'm going to repair the roof because having some trouble related to the economy, they start outbidding each other for the work. The margins go down. They're afraid of losing workers, so they'll bid on jobs just to get them, because it's very hard to recruit, train, and retain staff in that industry. And so it becomes like it steamrolls, okay, or snowballs. It just keeps getting worse, and they keep trying to bid on jobs. They're outbidding each other, and I'm seeing it right now where the industry is really starting to collapse. Now, of course, people have to repair the roof, so the consumer, the end user, is ultimately going to be the beneficiary because prices will come down, but the buyers are not going to get the return because they can't maintain their margins. And you'll see that everywhere. You'll see that in HVAC. I guarantee you'll see it in plumbing, electrical. It's happening. And so, but the unfortunate part is folks like you that are on the call, you can't get into those industries. I mean, it would be wonderful for you to get into it, but you can't outbid a PE firm. So you either have to go at a real, a lower entry point, not be delusional about the size of business that you could buy, but competing with, you can't compete with institutional buyers. And it will, I guarantee you, all end in tears. It always does.
Of course.
Tomas.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
Yeah. So I guess my main question is the balance of I work full time, I parent full time, and my search ebbs and flows, and I'll get, a year ago I spent 3 months under LOI for a really fun business, and it didn't work out, and then work happily ramped way up. But the work will always be for somebody else. So how do you, yeah, but I need to pay for swimming and swimsuits and softball. And so how do that, yeah, I guess I'm just looking for inspiration or realistic expectation on that balance.
It's a terrific question. So, and it's common. It's a common situation. So I'll answer it in a couple different ways. The ebbs and flows are impossible to avoid given the other parts of your life that you have to devote time to. And those are really important. And you're not giving up your job to do this on a full-time basis. And so there are going to be ebbs and flows. But I will tell you, and the data proves it, you have to spend 15 to 20 hours a week on this. That's really the number. And 20 is a better number than 15. And it's unavoidable. If not, there's two things that you reconcile. Either it's not going to happen or you got to get really lucky. Or it's going to happen over a much longer period of time. And by all of those, I mean, if you jump back into the search and you go, full steam for, 30 days, well, you may get something and then you've got to get busy with work or whatever, and then it'll dissipate and then it'll ramp right up, or work gets quiet and then something else happens. But that, you need a little more luck. It'll happen eventually. It's just going to take longer and you need a little more luck. And I've been collecting data on this since 2001. 20 hours is the number. I mean, that's 20 hours a week. I mean, and that's, it's almost like 1 and 1 equals 2. That's really the data point on it. Regardless of what's been automated or what have you, that's really the number. I mean, and there's no escaping it. Now, if you can't devote that time, then you just have to, you need to stay motivated, because it will happen, but understanding it's just going to take longer, and there'll be some periods where, there'll be a flurry of activity, and then like the deal that you were looking at, if it dies, then it'll be like, it's a fast death, and you're in mourning for, 90 days until it, when I say mourning, meaning like no activity, till it ramps up again. The other thing that I would suggest, and everybody should look into, and one of our clients, I don't know if you guys remember Gabe Bauer, he's running a pretty nice business now. And I had recommended someone to him, you may want to consider getting a virtual assistant. I use a couple of them in my business. They're great. The one who I have, she's been with me for a long time. She's overseas. I mean, she's like a rock star and does that and can do anything. So you may want to consider getting a virtual assistant to do some searching for you. And it's inexpensive. Like the amount you could probably get 20 hours a week for, a few $100s a month. And you give them some good direction, and they will, and it may be a little bit of training that you need to do, right? But they're generally very computer savvy, follow direction very, very well. They will do whatever you request them to do as far as reporting is concerned, but they can act as, as a terrific executive assistant, if you will, and especially if you have some good parameters or type of business. They could make phone calls, they could send emails, they could send letters, they could do some research. I mean, so I think it's really worth you investing the time to look at that. And if there's the person who works for me, I think she's pretty booked up time wise, but I could probably give you her name and contact information. Or there's lots of virtual assistant companies that are out there. The one thing I'll tell you, if you hire someone, after the first month, if they're not great, just go on to the next one. Like the first month it's not going to it won't get better. So if they're not doing what you need them to do, the way you want them to do it, without you being neurotic, just find the next one. There's lots of them. Lots of VA companies.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for all that. The number is probably like key for me of like, okay, I can I'm action oriented, so that gives me something to hang on.
Yeah, stay at it. Stay at it. I mean, it's going to happen. It just becomes, it's a little more not, it's challenging. It's you have some restraints and other obligations, and you recognize that, and you got to be realistic.
Hey, Richard, let me add a comment there because I think it'd be helpful in that scenario. And that is that I think it's really important that you really have a clear-cut vision of what your knockouts are, and that you get there as quickly as you can, because you can get hung up on a set of circumstances that really ultimately you probably should have got hung up on it and got out maybe 2 months earlier or whatever the case might be. So I'd say understanding clearly what your knockouts are and knocking those out of the equation as quickly as possible is really important. So understanding your knockouts and understanding what your must-haves are, so when you get engaged in a conversation with somebody who's motivated, you're not going to spend as much time on it, not going to be quite as disappointing if you don't spend half your life working on something that wasn't meant to be.
And it's a very good point, Thomas, because one of the points that Marvin makes, it's very easy to latch on to some deals just for the sake of, hey, I want to keep busy with something, especially if you don't have good deal flow and you have someone who may be, it could sounds interesting at the beginning or may be motivated, and there's a tendency to say, well, I'm just going to keep having this conversation because I have nothing else going on. And one of the things that I learned in my career that has been very helpful is to say very fast no's and slow maybes, right? It's like if it doesn't meet it, it doesn't meet it. Like, from our conversation in the course of golden rules, or whatever, if it doesn't hit it, gone, next. And not to keep the conversation going just as a time occupier. So I like Marvin's term of the knockouts. Like, it's no good, it's no good. And the ones that meet your criteria, you keep going.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I do sales. I get it. Like, you always learn something from chatting with somebody, but if you're not going to make any money, it's time to move on.
Yeah, correct. Go for a beer with them. They're not going to put money in your pocket at the most.
Yeah, thank you. Speaking of which, I got to jump off for sales.
Go get them. Nice seeing you, and stay in touch, please. And thank you, Marvin. That's very good advice. Marvin, maybe you can sell, unless there's no hands up yet, and I can go through some other questions in a minute. But for example, and given your experience, and I'm really glad you're on this call, so thank you for that, is what do you see as, and I don't want to give you too much, I don't want to give you too many guardrails here. You get these buyers who call you, they're getting ready for due diligence or what have you. Give us some of the stuff that you see as like repeating where individuals are making mistakes up to the point of the due diligence, questions that they haven't asked or things they haven't considered, or anything and everything related to where you get involved and where you see, ongoing mistakes by individual buyers, typically who haven't bought a business before.
I would say is that in front of due diligence, one of the things that happens frequently, and it's frequently driven because of the way brokers operate as well, is that buyers sometimes too quickly get into trying to analyze, trying to negotiate without having a clear picture of what's really going on from a financial point of view, right? I mean, I think if you accept at somewhat face value representations, right? And if the representations are misrepresentations, it's going to come out in due diligence at that point in time. So it makes it easier to renegotiate a deal if something has been represented to you and comes back and it's blatantly not true. It's not hard when it gets called out by an objective third party coming and saying, hey, this is not true, or it's not what we thought it was. It's easier to pivot then to what's the solution, because we accepted it at face value. So I would say being not too quick to try to beat the deal structure up, and getting to make sure you really have a clear understanding of what the real financial reality is. Because if you got a motivated seller and they're transparent, if there's a deal there, you can usually find a way. And it almost never is the deal that you started with.
Yeah, I mean, it's great advice. And the other part that I've seen is, I've, especially in the last couple of years, as there's been this proliferation of this search mentality of, MBAs going to buy a business thinking it's that easy. And I've alluded to it before. I get these unbelievable spreadsheets and pivot tables, and they've looked at everything again, if this happens, this will happen, and the projections and digging in and whatever, and it's all wonderful, but the numbers, until you get to the point of an LOI and quality of earnings, the numbers are like the easiest part of what you should be looking at in this conversation. Like numbers are numbers. Like they don't lie. People lie. Numbers don't lie. And it's, I used to work when I first started out. One gentleman, Frank Filey, you might see him online. He explained it to me in a way. He said, like, you could figure this out. If you have three legs of a stool, you can figure out the fourth. And so when you get into number at the beginning, the numbers make sense or don't make sense. I mean, you could address those questions. It's really going to surface during due diligence or quality of earnings by a professional. You want to get an understanding of the business, how this works, what the owner does every day. At the top of the pyramid is, am I the right person to run this business? Yes, it's a good business, but if you're the wrong person, you've heard me said that ad nauseum in the course. If you're not the right person, it doesn't really matter if it's a good business because it's not a good business for you. But getting context around the whole business is critically important. And the numbers, spend your time on them, but they are or they aren't. And don't try to make them into something they're not. Like if there's, and I've especially seen it when people, they rationalize, well, I could do this and I could do that and I'll improve the margins here and I'll improve the margins there. You're buying a business from someone who by and large is an expert in that particular business. Even if they haven't done a great job, they know that business intimately, things that they've tried or haven't tried. And so, if the margins are declining, they're declining for a reason, and you're not going to be the superhero to necessarily improve them overnight. And the other part that I would say, and it's not necessarily just a plug for Marvin, it's you get the right professionals, guys. Like when you get into deal, that's why it's important that you learn the financials and how to read them, because you can't hire a CPA for every single transaction to look at before you get an LOI. But align yourself with the right professionals. And when it gets time to do the due diligence, don't be penny wise, pound foolish. Get the right group to do the quality of earnings for you and a professional. And again, I'll put Marvin with your stuff. I'll circulate to everybody. But, work with good, smart people. I know in my businesses, I bought my first business at 29. You've probably heard of me talking about it before. Like, my ego got in the way, and I was a young business owner. But when I finally started hiring people that were bigger, better, faster, and smarter than me, which isn't very difficult because I'm not the brightest guy in the room. When I started hiring people that were bigger, better, faster than me, like my businesses soared. And so, line yourself up and align yourself with smart people. And on that note, I know Daniel has a question. I'll come back to it after, related to some of these groups where find buyers asking questions and getting answers for, and what I would suggest you do going forward. Daniel, how are you? Nice to see you.
I'm good. Thank you so much. So I do recall in some of your early videos of me watching that you stated that it was not worth getting a QofE. And then you just mentioned getting it through a professional now. So are you saying to get one or don't get one? And also, at what point does it make sense to start paying a professional to come in and start looking at some of the due diligence documentation?
Great question. I'll give you a quick background related to QofE, okay, and how it came about. Because let me first answer no. The answer is no, and then now I'll go explain it to you. So QofE came as a result of typically private equity firms and big institutional investors who started having to do, when they started to have some of their investments went sideways, they started having to get much more robust reviews of the financials and a whole bunch of different double clicks to all the things related to it and an assessment of the business. Quality of earnings, if you get a good financial group, a CPA who's well-versed in that industry, will be able to do a financial due diligence on the business that I will every day put up against what are the big firm quality of earnings, because every one that I've seen, and Marvin, jump in at any time, 70-page reports of quality of earnings have about 50 pages of bullshit, okay? And that's the technical term. Okay, it's filler, it's nonsense, it's stuff you already know or stuff you can figure out on your own, and it's a real cover your ass type of report that they've used, these institutional investors, to protect themselves when some of their investors come back and say, hey, you made a dumb deal, or the business you bought so that was no good and you didn't look at this. So they get these high-priced CPA firms to do these massive reports that don't trickle down or make any sense for anybody on this phone call, including me. Okay? So a good financial review by a competent CPA who's well versed in doing due diligence will provide you with the exact same answer. Okay, I apologize if there was any confusion as referring to it to QofE, because it's like the buzzword, right? And everybody wants the QofE, but it's nonsense. I had one recently that that I looked through on behalf of somebody, and it was insane. Like, they were going at this subject matter that had no relevance. Like, absolutely no relevance. It was like, guys, you're way out of your swim lane on what you're commenting on. So a financial due diligence done properly and covering the areas like we talk about in the course, okay? And I'm not sure if you're using the course, and they're not, or what's
Yes, I am.
outlined there. What's that? Oh yeah, Daniel, we just emailed each other back and forth, right? And you were talking about the webinars, right? That's the Daniel, right?
Yes.
That's why I like everybody to put their camera on, because at least we can put a face to an email. So yes, it's almost a misconception. It really is, to a lot of, it's a big misconception. And Marvin, please jump in.
Yeah, let me add a little bit of context to that, because I think the advice is correct. And I think in terms of where it comes from, because you have to understand that the quality of earnings as a general rule came out of, to Richard's point, came out of really with venture capitalists and larger deals and dealing with audited financial statements in the beginning, typically, right? These companies they have bank covenants, or they're required to maintain, audited financial statements. You're in this size of business, typically, you're not ever going to see an audited financial statement, right? Yeah. So you start out at quality of earnings by definition. They're going to come back and say, well, you can't trust the quality of earnings because it's not audited. It doesn't, it doesn't comport to generally accepted accounting principles. It's not an audited statement, so you almost blow it up to begin with. But to his bigger point, I was involved in a deal with the other side, paid about $103,000 for quality of earnings on their side of it, and I was looking at it, and I was working with the seller at that point in time. Our fees were about a tenth of that for that, a pretty complicated deal, but about a tenth of that, and their conclusions were basically, for the most part, didn't do much. I mean, they basically justified a lot of things, spent a lot of time and effort, but the conclusion really had no real value to that particular set of circumstances. I was horrified by what I saw in terms of what the buyers were paying for. But they were a venture capital group, to the point. They had to go through that process. I think the better terminology is probably, you want a limited quality of earnings review, so that you understand the limitations of what you can do with non-audited financial statements, which is what you're going to see most of the time. It's more emphasis on tax returns, which have been filed under penalty of perjury. And so you have at least some basis of standard against which someone has made a representation. And so at the end of the day, you're really seeking what the truth is as best you can determine it, and what can't be determined as truth. You have to understand there's a risk associated with it, because they're not going to warrant that information typically, and they're not going to, they're going to disclaim it. So you have to put some balance into that, recognize what you can do rationally, what's reasonable, and understand that because you're not going to have an audit unless you're going to pay for an audit at that point in time. You're going to have risk associated with the financial information that's got to be built into your deal structure. So that's where you mitigate a lot of it. So yeah, so it is, his advice is correct. Most of the time, it's way overpriced for the value it's delivered, and it's normally not appropriate for businesses of this size in terms of a full quality of earnings report.
Does that sound good and clear?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, and you see this in the world of finance, they get hung up on something or attracted to something. And I think the financial review that's done today, when done right, is no different than when it was done 25 years ago, what has to be looked at, and tracing the books and records, and a random, if you will, audit, of lack of a better word, of making sure that what's correct, that margins are sustainable, that they're not fudging the numbers, that type of stuff. I mean, the basics of a proper due diligence for a business acquisition at this size stay the same for years, and there's no way this becomes a six-figure. I mean, like, I don't want to get close to that. It's insanity.
Yep.
Okay, what do we got here? Sorry, I got to put on my glasses here. Okay. William, we have a question and we have a few minutes left, so let her rip.
So forgive me for using the A word, but to what degree can AI assist us with getting things to sort of 80% complete in terms of legal documents and accounting, and then professionals can help us with that last 20%? Or am I overestimating the ability of AI in this context?
I think AI is probably going to be implemented a ton related to attorneys and accountants. But the reality is, if you're going to be buying businesses and looking at a bunch of businesses, you need to learn this stuff on your own first. And you could eventually use it as a tool to augment it. And I've been spending a lot of time speaking to this one individual who's really he's way ahead of the curve as far as AI is concerned. And we were having this conversation. And the reality is that AI, above everything else, is great at data analysis. That's number one. Okay, so down below that, yes, is it eventually going to do the work for some attorneys and draft documents on some of the rote stuff? And if you enter every possible scenario, can it potentially spit out an agreement that's going to address every possible scenario? Yes, and down the road, it probably will be. And I see ones now, AI, where it analyzes a deck or a sim, right? But here's the thing, okay? This is the old, catch a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. You've got to learn this stuff on your own. Yeah, it's very easy for you to go and hire an attorney to look at every deal and every LOI. But if you don't know what should be in an LOI, you have to learn what should be in an LOI before you submit an LOI. And all this whole part of this process, whether looking at the numbers or the legal side of things, you're not going to know everything, but you got to know a lot of it. That just makes you a better business buyer. And we're not sending men to the moon here with what you have to look at, but you need to learn this stuff. So will AI play a role? Yeah, I mean, it probably can. I mean, I'm not that hyped up on it. I think there may be, hopefully there'll be some advancements in AI, which are happening at the speed of light related to some deal flow. And yes, it'll be able to analyze some sims, but you know what? You need to learn how to analyze a deck yourself and know what questions to ask. And when you read information, be able to trigger something that happened, something in your mind that triggers a question. You've got to learn this stuff.
Yeah, just to add to point to that, you can have, it goes back to the advent of computers, right? Which, unfortunately, I'm old enough to be around when a lot of the early stuff came out. But I would say to you that the information that you get out of AI is still only as good as the information that goes into it. And so you've got to have a high degree of confidence in the integrity of the information that's going in ahead of time, the information that you're receiving, for example, in an acquisition of a business. And so if that information that you're getting is taking at face value and is inaccurate, you're going to come back to conclusions that are going to be inaccurate very fast and very well presented, but it's still going to be inaccurate. And I see that going on right now. I see that from that point of view. You see a lot of that. So you got to be careful because it's very well presented, it's very fast, and it's very impressive. But at the end of the day, it's still only as good as the quality and integrity of the information that's presented in the beginning.
Yeah, and Marvin will remember. I remember, we're both old enough to know that it was a common phrase. Probably there's no one on this phone outside of the two of us, or on this call outside of the two of us who would remember this. I remember people saying, I've been replaced by a computer, right? Well, that never really happened, or it happened extensively. But I'll give you some examples of where AI has been fantastic. But when it comes to analyzing sims, you can't use AI to have a conversation with a seller. Right? You can't use AI to start to build a meaningful relationship with a seller. That's not where it has its use. That it's not going to replace a human relationship. It's great for data analysis. But I'll give you an example recently of something that was unbelievable, where it's going and used in the right way. So I do some intermediary work, and when I get an engagement, we spend probably up to 30 days to compile a target list of potential buyers of a company that I represent, usually larger companies that have been active or made acquisitions in the sector or are looking for acquisitions. So it's M&A activity relative to the business type that I'm representing or we're representing. So everybody, got that? That's like the criteria of one prong of prospects that we look at. And that usually takes us about 30 days to compile. There's a lot of research. There's one company that I started using now. You put in all the data. You could even put in the deck, but all the data points related to the type of industry, the size of business, sector, the financials, you input all this data related to the particular business that we're representing, and then it'll spit out a target list based on M&A activity. This used to take us a month. The last one I did with them, it took 8 minutes. Now I'd say probably hit 80% of all the M&A activity in the sector related to that. So it's not perfect, but it was pretty darn close. And it was 8 minutes versus 30 days. But that's data analysis. That doesn't replace, doesn't in turn go out and have the conversations with the prospects. So the data analysis piece is phenomenal. It's going to continue to get better, but anybody who tries to remove the human element from buying and selling businesses is going to they're doing themselves a real disservice.
Yeah, and I would say until you replace the human element in business, right? If you're buying a business that has no human element associated with it, then it probably
Right.
makes more sense.
Yeah, you're buying a human. You're buying humans, and your staff are going to be human, and in the relationship, and you have a good conversation with a seller, and then you have a number of conversations with them, and they start to see in you the person that they want to buy this business. That changes the whole dynamic of even the deal terms that they may be looking at. So it's you simply cannot replace the human element. It's not going to happen. Okay. Any other questions? I think we're at about 4:30, so we're good. If anybody needs Marvin's information, you can put in the chat, Marvin, or I think you did maybe already.
MBA/America.com. That's it. MBA/.America.com. Happy to help.
MBA.America.com.
MBA dash.
MBA.America.com.
That's it. Yep.
Let me just see here. MBA-America.
Dash.
America.
America.com. Yep.
Is that good?
That's it, man.
Yep. Perfect.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I didn't come for that plug, but I appreciate it. And you always can reach out about a question or something like that. My meter's typically not running unless you engage me, so I'm happy to help. I'm the same way as Richard is. I really am a believer in the entrepreneurial system and really like helping people who are trying to do it. It's hard. That's the other thing. I would just make one final comment on. There's probably 8 or 9 good buyers for every single good business. So you're in a competitive space trying to find businesses for sale. So it's not easy. But there's an awful lot of businesses that nobody wants to buy that sometimes get sold. So I would just Richard's point about it's a process. You got to work at it, and I just add to that finding motivated people. And having good, competent help wherever it is, in terms of your support. Having a relationship long-term with a financial person is important, building that relationship. And I'm not suggesting that's always me, it's not. But I would just say to you, that's important. You've got to have that piece and understanding your financials. You've got to understand how to read a financial statement, what it's telling you, and how to supervise somebody who's doing accounting for you. You don't have to be that person, but you need to have that understanding.
Yeah, it's a great point. And Marvin, I appreciate you participating today. It's great having you, and nice seeing you. It's always good seeing everybody. And the other thing that I will, want to add for everybody, and it does come up, entrepreneurship is a wonderful world, and sometimes it takes a little bit of readjusting your thinking. The most important thing is to get in the game. And sometimes it takes buying a business that may be a little smaller than you anticipated, what have you. But it's a journey. It's the proverbial. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. And depending on what you're up against, or challenges, or restrictions, or time, or lifestyle, whatever it may be, getting into the game is really important. And so if you find yourself having to adjust your thinking as far as deal size or whatever, that's great too. Just, do whatever you can to get yourself into business ownership, because you never know what leads to. The first business I actually started, and then about 90 days after, recognized that growth through acquisition was going to be much better than organic growth. But the first one that I got into was 30 grand, which is today's equivalent to about 75. And it was, pardon my French, was a shitty little business, but you never know what it leads to, because you get up every day trying to make the business better, trying to improve things, looking at ways to grow. And as long as you have that platform of your own business, you can do all those wonderful things. So, over-indexing or looking for the perfect deal, which never exists. It's just more important to get into the game. And of course, if there's anything that I can do to help anybody, everybody knows where to find me. And please reach out at any time. I think we have one more question from Daniel. Go ahead.
So your last statement kind of made me think about something. So I'm not new to entrepreneurship whatsoever. I've had multiple businesses. I've been unable to cross the multiple six figures a year mark. So me evaluating what the highest point of leverage that I could use is I arrived at acquiring a business. But it seems as if the purpose of acquiring a business is getting over the humps, or the finding business that already got over the humps that I was unable to get over and have that skill. So how do I know what's too small? Because I've heard you say that one of the mistakes people make when buying business is going too small. So what's too small?
Okay.
And that's kind of where I'm struggling at right now.
Perfect question. You want to buy the biggest business you can afford to run, not afford to buy, meaning what is within your immediate skill set of your ability to operate that business. So you may have gobs of money, but if you buy a business that you can't run, that don't have the right skill set, it's the wrong business for you. So you buy the biggest business. I know it sounds like an Oxford word, the biggest business you can afford to run, that you have the skill set. But that should not take away from the fact that, say, hey, if I just got to get into the game and it's a smaller business, that's okay too. If you're doing this full time, you have to support a lifestyle. Sometimes you have to take a step back and think about your spending and try to, just curtail things a little bit for a short period of time. But while I'm a big proponent of getting into the game and a smaller business is okay, the biggest business that you can afford to run based on your skill set is the right size business.
I don't want to be an asshole here, because I typically only like asking questions when I actually have problems. But from that point, what metrics are you utilizing to determine what I actually can handle? Like, I know what my skill sets are. I'm a software developer, engineer, and test. I'm big in tech. I'm big in automation and all of those things. But as far as the size of a business itself, I don't know what my current capacity is.
Okay. So the way you measure that as best you can is, of course, with understanding when you go to meet with owners, what do they do every day? What level of second tier management? Is there second tier management in place, or is the operating the business all going to fall to you? And what tasks does the owner do every day? And can you handle all of those tasks? Because you could be maybe only part of it. And what you're going to see, Daniel, is a lot of businesses where, let's say, I'm going to give them an arbitrary number, just throwing off, $250,000 of seller earnings, what do you call them? Seller discretionary earnings, whatever, all these type of things. But they haven't put in a second tier of management. They just keep hauling money out of the business. So getting a real deep understanding of what the owner does every day and what has to happen to drive the revenue and profits of that business. And as long as that matches with your skill set, if it's saying, well, they do this, but I can't handle that, then that either you may have to put someone into place, or it's just, hey, I can't handle that size business that has, in addition to all the, sales that the owner does, they're also doing product development. And that's like I have no skill in there whatsoever. So I need to find a business that's, sales oriented or what have you. So it really spending time understanding what drives that business forward. And it's usually in a smaller business falls to the seller.
Richard, you raised a good point there. And I think from an accounting point of view, and along your, I think most of the time you hear in this space, in talking with brokers and advisors and so forth, I think the overutilization term of SDE, seller discretionary earnings, and the assumption is that always you're going to go in and that the seller is going to drive the business and it's going to be a full-time role and so forth, as opposed to most venture capital people are looking at EBITDA, which basically says, what's the business throwing off after management, after these, right? You have to have management built into this value piece. Normally, you're going to pay a higher multiple on a basis of EBITDA, but you're factoring the fact that you're going to have somebody in there running that business. And so you're really looking at it more objectively. What's the business worth? Yep.
Yeah. Come on. Yeah, and EBITDA is a managed no debt business, and the reality is you're typically, at this level, you're typically buying an owner operated business, and you want to buy an owner operated business. I mean, it sounds great to have an absentee run business or a managed business, but when you're putting all you're betting your future on this. I think Tom needs to turn off your mic. When you're banking your future on this. You want to learn this business. You want to get totally immersed. You want to understand this business, because if you have managers in place, which is all wonderful, but what happens if they get hit by a Pepsi truck? If you don't understand this business, you don't even know what type of persona you need to replace them. So when we talk about the numbers, and as Marvin mentioned, EBITDA is a managed, no debt-free business. You're looking at seller's discretionary earnings, owner operator. Can you, Daniel? Ultimately, you want to answer this question. Think about it this way: although the seller will stay on from some training, day one, effectively, they get out of their chair. You put your rear end into their chair. Can you continue to do what they do? Sometimes you'll do it better, sometimes you do it worse, but at the very least, you need to be able to do what they're doing. And if it's not comfortable with you, you don't want to learn on the job when you're the owner. That's good for as an employee. So you really take good stock of what your skill set is. And there's nothing wrong with saying I can't do this or whatever, but it may just necessitate saying I need a less complicated business. So if you're honest with yourself and humble and honest with yourself, and I think based on even the way you posed the question, you certainly strike me as someone who is, you'll be able to recognize that this is, I can handle this. There's no problem. I got this. All right. Well, thank you,
Great.
everybody. Nice to see everybody. Thank you very much for your
Appreciate it,
time.
Richard.
And
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you so much for your time.
of course,
Yep.
and Marvin, thank
Appreciate
you for your comments, and everybody.
Happy to
your
be.
questions.
Enjoyed it. Appreciate it. Good luck to everyone. It's a tough journey, but it's worth it.
It's worth it. Well worth it.
Mhm.
And if you have any questions, get in touch with me anytime. It's good to see everybody. Stay well and keep plugging. Don't stop.